Hi, welcome to this tutorial on how to pass data from one view controller to another. And we're going to look at making it just a simple logon system. There'll be no authentication in this one because what we're looking at how we pass something like L Marsden and a password through to another view controller and seeing that data. So if you're interested in how to create multiple view controllers and how to pass data between them, then this is the tutorial for you. This is a little bit of a time-consuming tutorial, but once you get the hang of it, it does become a lot quicker. So let's get underway by starting a new project. So we're going to start with a standard application. Click on Next. We're going to give it a name. I'm just going to call it VC_tutorial for View Controller Tutorial, and we're in the storyboard mode rather than the Swift UI, and we're using the language of Swift rather than Objective-C. You can include tests if you want to, it's up to you. And then click on Next and create a folder. Now once you've landed, click on the main. This is our main view controller, and I'm just going to resize my screen. Having good screen real estate is really useful in working in Xcode. So the larger the monitor, it does make your life a little bit easier. So this is our main view controller. The first thing I'm going to do is just change its background just to give it a color that we can work with. So I'm going to go with the teal color. And this will identify this view controller, and when I create another one, we can add the color to that as well. Now we need to add some elements to this page. Now to do this, we're going to need a label. So I'm just going to click on the plus and then add a label to this. Now we're just going to edit this label up. So I'm just going to come up and change its fonts. I'm going to go to a custom font. And then I'm going to pick a different font. So I'm going to pick Impact. And then I want to change its font size. I'll just bring it in so we can see these working. So then I want to change the font size, and I'm going to change this to something like 40. Now the color at the moment is black. A white's better against something that is darker. And then we can actually change what the text is and change it from label to login system. And then when I click out of there, it takes its shape, and I'm just going to roughly move it into place. Now I'm not going to add the constraints or anything to this object yet. I like to build my UIs first and then add all the constraints at once, and I'll show you how I do that at the end. Now once this is done, I need some more labels as well, because I need the username and also I need the password. So I'm just going to bring these out and put them on the screen. Now you see that blue bar, that's where you're starting to leave the safety area or the safe area. So it's a good idea that you build everything inside that. So I'm just going to bring these two down and I'm going to adjust them. Now I'll show you a quick easy way of doing that. I'm just going to delete one because they're going to have basically the same properties. I'm going to just quickly change the color. I'm going to keep the same font, but I'll need to increase its size. So I'm just going to change that to 25. And click on done. Now I can change its name, and this one's going to be username. Press enter. Then I can just come back and select the element, and I can click on it and go Command C, Command V, and then I can move the second one into place, and then just change it from username to password. And now the element's the same. Now if I hold down Command, I can select both, and I can move them as a group and put them into places as well. Now the next thing I need on my user interface is actually some text boxes for the user to enter. So once again, I'm going to click on the plus sign, and there's a text field, and I'm just going to drag the text field out and just put that into sort of position where I'd like it, and then just stretch that out. And then I'm just going to duplicate this as well and move the other one into position. Now with the top text box, I'm just going to click on that. There are some properties that you can use, so I'm just going to use the alignment and make it center. So when you type in this box, the text will appear in the center of the text box, not at the left or the right. And with the password, we probably want to change that as well. We could make that centered. And we can also add secure text entry. This will give us the dots as we type into this text area. And the last thing we need to do is add a button. So once again, add the plus sign. I'm going to bring out the field button and put that on stage. And I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger so it's predominant. And we need to shape this a little bit better. So let's have a look at. So let's change the background to something a little bit more contrasty, like yellow. So the call to action's a little bit clearer. Let's change the foreground to black, so we've got a really good contrast between the text and the background. Rather than button, we'll call it login. And you can see that it doesn't really call us to action at the moment. So, and let's change the text size. So we're going to go back into the text area. And rather than being regular, we are going to go to heavy. And the font, we're going to go to Title 1. And click on Done. Now I'd like it to look more like a button. So what we want to be able to do is round the edges. So what we're going to do is change the corner style. And we're going to go to large. And then what we might do is actually stretch this out and make it a little bit thinner so it looks more like a call to action. Now before testing our ViewController, what we need to do is add the constraints. An easy way of adding constraints is select the ViewController, hold down Command A, select all the elements, and then in the bottom right hand corner, select A for attributes, and then add missing constraints. So this will add all the constraints for this ViewController. Another way of dealing with these is you can also click A when you make one adjustment, click on A, clear all the constraints, that way they all get removed, and then add all the constraints again. And that will make sure your user interfaces are correct. Now we've also got some text boxes out here. We need to constrain those as well. Not in the way of its XY position, but in the way of its width and its height. So select both of those and click Add to Constraints. And do the same for the second one. Now all the constraints are in. We can then test our program. So you can see that the system's constrained well, but there's a problem here. So we might adjust that just so it looks nice. But we have a button, we have someone we can type in, so we can put a username like L Marsden, and we can type in a password. And you see the dots come up. So let's just fix this login here. We're just going to make that a little bit wider. We're going to center this text. We're going to center the object once again. And I'm just going to select everything like I did before. Clear the constraints and add the missing constraints and run it once more. And now we have our first ViewController ready to go. Okay, let's move to the second ViewController. Now to add a second ViewController, all you have to do is click on the plus sign to add an element and just type in View and then C. And you can see ViewController come up. Click and drag this out onto the stage. Now I have two ViewControllers here and you can move them around and adjust them however you like. First thing I'm going to do is change its background color so we know we're working with a different one. I'm just going to go to a blue color. And then we need to build the elements on there again. But this time we're going to have some outputs that appear here. So rather than using text boxes, we're actually going to add some labels. And we need two of them. But once again, I'm going to do the same thing where I just use one label and I will then copy and paste this. So I'm going to go for a contrasting white. I'm going to keep the left hand side. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger. I'm going to go to a 20-point font. And I'm just going to give it some default data because we'll change this as we go. Username, and I'll just put colon in there. Also want to change this background color just so it's got a bit of contrast. I just want to go to a very light system gray. And as you can tell now, the text doesn't work with that. So what I'll do is change its text color now back to say a black. There we go. And I'm going to copy this again, Command C, Command V, and make a password one. So the idea is when I type in the username password, click on login, it will then move to this view controller and we will then see the username and password appear in these two labels. Now the reason for using labels, it doesn't allow the user to type into it, but we can treat them the same as the text box and display it back to the user. Now once we've done that, we need to insert, so under editor, we want to embed a navigation controller. We also need to be able to create a coding file for this. At the moment, we've got one for main, which is this one here. And we've got ViewController, this Swift file, and this one actually belongs to main. So what we want to do is create another little Swift file, but we want it to link to this field here. So to do that, I'm just going to right mouse click and go new file. And it's going to ask me what file I want. And we want the Cocoa Touch class and click on next. We need to give it a name. So its class name is going to be, we're going to call it logged in. VC for ViewController. And we'll keep the rest the same and click on next and click on create. Now you can see we have a ViewController and we're just going to delete this little comment area and we'll delete this one as well. Now once we've done that, we just need to link the ViewController for this second page to that file logged in. So I'm just going to click on the ViewController here and then go to the identity inspector here. I need to add the class. You can pull the list down and we should see in the list logged in ViewController, and that will link those together. We need to give it a name as well. So I'm going to call it logged in underscore VC and use that as its storyboard ID as well. So that's associated this storyboard to this coding file. Now what we want to be able to do is when we click on the login is capture the data from these two fields and then use the ViewController to open up this ViewController here. So we can then code this to display the information here and pass that data across. Now to do this, first of all, we need to capture the data from these two forms. So we need to create the outlets. There's a couple of ways you can do this, but I'm just going to use the assistants just to make my life a little bit easier. Now the first thing I've got to do is put the outlets in. So I'm going to hold down Control, click, drag out. And underneath here, just let it go, give it a name. This is going to be TXT, which is Hungarian notation, and it's going to be username. I'm just going to press enter to add some space for the outlets, and then I'm just going to bring the password outlet up. So holding Control down again, click drag up and let it go underneath. And this one's going to be called TXT for text box password. And I'm just going to remove that little blank line in between, line 13, so they sit nicely together. Okay, those outlets are done. We now need to use the function one. So for the button click, so click drag across, and this one's going to be an action outlet. And it's going to go to a btn and it's going to be login and press enter. So now I have that information. So let's look at loading up the ViewController. So when I click on login, it's going to open this ViewController here. So to do that, we need to write some code. So we're going to and we're going to create a variable called VC, which is short for ViewController. And it's going to be like a class. In other words, this variable is going to have multiple properties, multiple bits of data in it. So it's not just a variable to hold one piece of data like username, but VC is going to have all these little subparts. So to start with, we're going to set it to itself. And we're also going to load up the storyboard. And we're going to place a question mark at the end just so it makes sure it's safe. and then we're going to add the instant view controller with identifier, and then we need to add the identifier. Now this is the name of the view controller. So what's going to go in here is you need to place the string of its name. So it's going to be called, in my case, logged in underscore VC. Now, if you're not sure on its name, remember you can always go back into the view controller itself, click on the dot, you just need to open this menu bar up again, and its name's here as well. And I don't know why we have lost it down here with its storyboard ID either. So we just make sure that stays there as well. So we just close that up and head back to logged in, and we can see that now links up. And we need to set as and put a wrapper on that, and then we can put the name in again. So this allows the view controller to be itself, and then what we want to do is navigate. Now to do this, we go self, navigation controller, question mark, dot, push view controller. And then it's going to ask for the UI view controller. Now we've actually stored that view controller in VC, so we can actually now just put here VC. And then it's going to go, well, it's animated, and we can actually call it a boolean, and it wants to know it's a boolean, which is going to be true. So we need to set the boolean value. Okay, so let's just test our program now. Oh, there's a little enter in there that's wrecked that or something. Hang on. We'll just make this a little, we're getting an error, we'll make this just a little bit bigger. The / there is causing us a problem because it's meant to be a full stop. And VC is meant to be lowercase to match that variable there. And now we don't have any errors. So let's go to the runtime version now. Click on play. It's good to see that errors do occur. Storyboard's being built. Here it is, and when I click on the login, we now have the password and username come up, and the back has come back from when we inserted the navigation. So we can now transport between two scenes. But how do we carry the data from here across? Well, that's the next cool part about it, because we said before that VC is like a class. It can have lots of elements. So what I'm going to do is underneath this, between these two commands, this creates a variable called VC. Here we actually use VC. Go to the next view controller, and we're actually going to use the property or the variable VC, and we're going to add the username and password to that variable. So when we go into the new view controller, the data is going to be passed across to the new view controller, and we'll be able to see that. So to do that, we're just going to go VC, which we know is the variable that we have above. And I'm going to set a property called username, and I'm going to let that equal to the txt username dot text, and I'm just going to put a wrapper on that. So in other words, if it's blank, it can handle it. So the text username, take the text from this element on the screen, which is found by the outlet, and place that into the variable VC, but as a variable name called username. And we're going to do the exact same thing, the password. So vc.password is going to be equal to txt. And the reason for using txts and the Hungarian notation makes it really easy to find your variables as you go along. And we want the text part of that object. And we want to store that in there, and then we want to navigate to the next page. Now these errors are occurring because when we move to the logged in page, they currently don't exist. So we'll resolve those when we get there. So now let's head back to our main. And what we need to do now is actually create outlets for this page here. So this is our logged in view controller. So if I clicked on logged in, you can see it's the logged in view controller. So we'll head back to main, click on this. We need to create the outlets. So once again, just put some space in, clicking, drag up. Now these are labels, so they're LBLs. LBL username. And then we're going to have LBL password. And I'm just going to tidy these up again. Now I'm just going to create also some variables to receive those other bits of information. So we're going to have a var username, and it's going to be equal to nothing at the moment, and var password, and that's going to be equal to nothing as well. So when we click back here, we've got username, and notice how, I'll just go back, notice how those errors have now resolved because we now have variables in here to reciprocate the data into. Now once we've done that, we just need to be able to display those on the ViewController. So once it loads, all we need to do now is display that data. So to do that, we need to reference the object on the screen, which is LBL, and it's going to be username. We want to change the text part of the label, and we want that to now be equal to username. But rather than just display the contents of the variable, we're going to do something a little bit different. We're going to put the word username, and then we're going to use an escape character, and then we're going to put the variable in here. So this will then put username like this, and then the variable after it, so it all sits inside the label nicely. And we're going to do the same thing for LBL password. Okay, so that will display the information there. So let's test our program now. We can now type in a username like L Marsden, give it a password, and click on login. So the reason I created an error when entering data, well, this one here should be password. So let's just fix that one. And we'll just go check our outlet. Okay, we just put the outlet back in to ensure that that's there. We'll save this. Password, we'll just check its outlet. Password, ViewController. TXT username, so they're set now. Let's run the program. Username, Marsden. Password, login. There we go, we're now transporting between it. And then we can head back. We can then change the log on. And password. When we log in, you can see that is now working. Just in regards to the errors, most errors do actually come from the outlets, so making sure that they're linked together and not doubled up. So in most cases, you're forever just right mouse clicking and checking those properties, including the properties of your buttons as well. So that concludes our tutorial on how we can create multiple view controllers and pass data between one view controller and a second view controller. We're using the classing and passing it through those variables. There are other ways of passing data between two view controllers, and we'll cover that in another tutorial, especially when you want to have multiple view controllers where the data might come in on the first view controller and you're not using it until a fifth page, but you can't handshake the data along from view controller to view controller. This method is very effective for when you're moving between ViewController A and ViewController B. So remember, if this tutorial was useful, give it a thumbs up, like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and also have a look around for other useful Xcode tutorials.